Spokane is really become a large city that's still a small city. Everybody still knows everybody, and a lot of the values that have defined Spokane forever are still here.
I grew up here in the Garfield neighborhood, pretty close to Corbin Park. I literally knew everybody that lived in every house, 6 blocks in any direction from my house. I knew where every single person lived.
I think we've become much larger and more urban than anybody realizes, and we're dealing with some of those issues. But I think those old, smaller town principles and ways of doing things are the very strength we have to bring to difficult issues like increasing housing supply, dealing with homelessness.
I'm Jim Frank, and I'm with Greenstone Corporation. We've been building homes in Spokane for 40 years.
I'm Gavin Cooley. I was the CFO of the city of Spokane for 18 years, 6 administrations, and saw a lot of what happened at City Hall over that 18 years.
Most of what we try to do as a neighborhood is based on the feelings that I had growing up in the neighborhood that I did. Kendall Yards is a neighborhood where you can get to know people, where you have services close to where you live. I just think that sense of community that's been built in this neighborhood, there is a strong sense of community in Kendall Yards.
You're not driving out into the valley somewhere or far away to get the things you need. You're walking to a neighborhood spot. You're meeting your friends and neighbors in a neighborhood spot. Sadle Park is really symbolic for what we're facing right now. What we have to realize is Spokane is in the top 10 or so deficits in housing in the nation. History is repeating itself. We have a housing shortage, and a really big housing shortage was after World War II. And we had people coming back from the war with no place to live. And so the response to that was a united, really concerted effort to build houses in a very short period of time. And in just 5 years, 18,000 homes were built, which is astonishing. The approximate deficit we have right now is 25,000 homes, which sounds insurmountable. And yet, 18,000 were built in 5 years in the late 40s. We could do that again and even much better.
Before 1950, there weren't zoning regulations. Zoning regulations are a relatively new thing. So there's a commercial zone over here, there's a multifamily zone over here, there's an office zone over here, and so they're all separated.
In Spokane, we have our own process. So if you arrive from another city, you know, that you're doing work everywhere else, and you just assume that they're following the state code that everybody else follows, and they say, no, actually, we do it our own way in Spokane. We have different rules, different regulations, and it just makes it really hard to be a developer in Spokane.
So if you look at neighborhoods we love, most of them were developed before zoning regulations came in place. So look at a little neighborhood like Garland, for example. Look at South Perry, for example. We've got a nice mixture of single-family houses, townhouses, smaller multifamily buildings, all mixed together on the same street, across the corner from each other. And that creates the opportunity for like an economic diversity, and it creates an opportunity for social diversity within the neighborhood, which is really important. I think people are recognizing that we kind of need to go back to the way we were doing things. We need to mix things at a finer scale. We need to stop isolating uses.
We didn't fall behind 25,000 units overnight. This has been going on for decades, but nobody's been willing to tackle those tough issues. I mean, this is the cultural seat of the city. We got this beautiful river, the falls. The whole reason we're here is right here, our downtown, our whole history. And yet the development isn't happening here, and it puts the whole urban landscape in Spokane at risk when we don't address these problems.
Over 50% of the new housing is now being built in North Idaho. And so how is that better? When we suppress housing in Spokane, we're allowing it to happen in North Idaho. Eventually, that's where the tax base will go. That's where the wealth will go. That's where the new retail will go. And then Spokane will be left with median family income that gets stifled in its ability to grow.
That's a challenge we have now, because now the city is largely built out. So any concerted effort to bring 25,000 units in means it's going to affect us all in different ways. And so there's a lot of biases out there, biases against multifamily living in, single family neighborhoods and others. And so you have this NIMBY problem, the not in my backyard kind of problem. And so we need to find ways to get past that. And there's a lot of ways to do that.
When you allow your housing prices to escalate the way we have, then at the margin, there are families every day becoming homeless because they simply can't afford the rent or they can't afford to buy a house. We're spending an enormous amount of money dealing with the symptoms of that, trying to build shelters and temporary housing where people can kind of be warehoused, but we're not dealing with what caused the problem in the first place.
When you raise the price and you keep raising it and more people can't afford it, it's almost like a game of musical chairs. And you have 25,000 too few housing units in the city. Of course, the people on the edge are not going to get a seat.
Why are so many people becoming homeless? And it's really because of housing policy.
And in Spokane, we're in the top 10 homelessness rates in the nation. And that's tied directly to that shortage of housing in Spokane. And if we want to see things change, we have to address housing. So I would argue it's actually the number one issue, because once you solve that one, the other things start to fall in place.
What kind of a community do we want? What kind of neighborhoods do we want? What do we want them to look like and feel like? We need to understand the kind of development that we want to encourage. And if what we're trying to encourage is this kind of mixed-use development, finer scale, then we need to prepare a regulatory framework that doesn't just allow it. It has to encourage it.
You can go to many cities where density is increased, with that kind of multifamily, low-income housing, and it's really brought more energy and in fact increased property values because it becomes a more desirable place. You have more coffee shops, you have more commerce, you have more people coming together. And there's huge benefits to more housing in a community.
In this community, we need more housing, and we need it now.
Spokane needs more housing now.